report of an in vivo investigation on tamoxifen's efficacy against leishmania infection and points to a new alternative in the treatment of leishmaniasis. In this example, the authors clearly express that their study filled the gap mentioned in the introduction. When you have your first draft ready, check the gap and the contribution of your draft. If your contribution does not relate to your gap, then you most likely picked the wrong gap. Go back to your introduction and rethink the gap you want to consider in your study. On many occasions, the novelty and contribution blocks are presented together, which is a smart strategy, especially if your study has important limitations to be accounted for. Together, the novelty and contribution blocks build a strong argument favoring the publication of your paper and may overcome its limitations. The next block to build your discussion is the limitation block. It is critical that authors be the first ones to comment on the limitations of the study, not leaving this task for the editor of their journal or even the reviewers. Pretending the study has no limitations is a big mistake that may compromise the chances of having the article accepted for publication. In fact, it is a mistake to think that a study with limitations will not be accepted. This would happen only if the limitations in question do in fact compromise all the results presented in the study. In this case, the authors need to evaluate whether they really have a story to tell. Anyone doing research in the biological and biomedical fields knows that no study is perfect and that many have limitations. These limitations may include a small sample size, an analysis that is missing due to lack of funds or expertise, the use of controls that do not completely control all the alternative explanations for the result found, and so on. However, if we think that the goal of a research project is to find sound answers for relevant questions, then we need to accept that sound answers do not mean proof beyond any doubt. Our scientific knowledge advances due to the work done by thousands of scientists who together contribute with little pieces of information. Sometimes the limitation of a given study is exactly what prompts the development of new technology or new approach to investigate a given phenomenon. Thus, do not hesitate to spell out the limitations of your study. Let's see some examples of limitation. One limitation of our study is that we included a relatively small cohort of 277 healthy pre-pubertal children from approximately 200 mothers. Also, the group of children was homogeneous, which may limit the applicability of our findings to the general population, particularly to children from lower socioeconomic status. Avoid presenting the limitation block as a single paragraph and far from blocks that highlight the strengths of your paper. Thus, I recommend that whenever possible, you should present the limitations of your study just before or after the novelty and contribution blocks. Let's see some examples where the limitation is presented close to the blocks that highlight the strengths of the study. A limitation of this study is that different methods were used to collect dietary data in each country. Another limitation is that both recalls and food records are known to underestimate intakes. This study is the first to use national dietary surveys to compare Brazilian and American diets. Here's another example. Our study has significant limitations. We cannot rule out the possibility of a beta error since we had only a 38% power to detect differences in prevalence of neurocognitive impairment similar to the ones found between triple therapy and LMT. Our study does not confirm an association between protease inhibitor monotherapy and neurocognitive impairment, even in patients receiving monotherapy for a prolonged period of time. These results question the importance of using multiple drugs with potential activity in the CNS to prevent neurocognitive impairment. The last block in the discussion is the building block called Next. The production of scientific knowledge is in constant movement. Every time we find a sound answer for a given question, new questions emerge. Therefore, a paper that describes the results obtained in a research project can never be the final word on the subject. Thus, the inherent characteristic of any scientific project should be addressed at the very end of the research paper. In order to write the building block Next, go back to your outline and check your answer for question number 12, which is, what are the next steps? There is a famous sentence found in many published papers that is associated with this idea, which is, further studies are necessary. I recommend that you never use this sentence in your paper, as it is a cliché that does not provide any information to your reader. Instead, inform your reader what type of further study should be done, what type of analysis would complement your findings. In summary, be specific about what you think that should be done next in order to advance the frontier of knowledge in your field. You may also consider to use this block to inform how your finding connects with the real world and how it may affect people's lives. When you show that your finding may be used to solve an actual problem or that your finding has implications in other fields, then you have better chance to have your paper accepted in a higher impact journal. Never forget that we do science to help us understand ourselves and the world we live in. Thus, showing that your results do fill this role is greatly appreciated by editors in general. Let's see some examples of the building block Next. The next challenge is to narrow down the genes screened in this study based on expression patterns and to finally exploit and functionally identify the genes that are truly responsible for the canker tolerance. It would also be of considerable interest to examine interspecific variability for species with a wide geographic range, as they may vary as a function of prevailing ecological conditions, as seen in the defense mechanism of this species. In both examples, it is clear that authors are suggesting what should be further investigated in their field in order to advance the knowledge. Sometimes, journals ask authors to write a conclusion that is separate from the discussion section. The conclusion should have no more than a paragraph of 3 or 4 sentences. If you feel the need to write more than that, chances are that your paper misses information that only now, in its very end, you feel the urge to add. The conclusion should not include new information, new data, or new interpretations of the results that were not presented in the main body of your paper. The conclusion is not a second abstract of your paper. To write the conclusion of your paper, go back to the blocks, response, novelty, and contribution, and chances are that most of your conclusion will be found there. The conclusion is the take-home message.